Welcome to Fitness Explained, the podcast. I'm your host, Mil Waller. I'm a third-year sport and exercise science student, and I have a passion for exercise and helping others create a balanced and healthy lifestyle through understanding the science behind health and fitness. Hello everyone, welcome back to the second episode of our Fitness Explained, the podcast. I am so sorry that this is coming to you a day late. This is my fourth attempt at recording. I had a few technical difficulties. I'm not exactly the most tech savvy person I know or around, so I do appreciate your patience. And today what we're going to be talking about is the menstrual cycle and women's hormones and how they can have an impact on performance and training and some of the research that has been going on around it. But first of all, I want to talk about the item, exercise, product, task, or food I've been enjoying recently or in the past week. And what I did last week, a friend of mine from uni, his name is Jordan Stubbs. He's a PT and in third year with me at uni. His Instagram handle is at Jordan, Jordan .Stubbs, Stubbs. He is an awesome trainer. I think his ethics and how he runs his page is super awesome. And so I wanted to get into running again because obviously the gyms are closed in Melbourne, and I think that running for me is the best way to stay active when the gym isn't open because I really don't like training at home. So he's written me a 12-week program, and this is to keep me accountable because previously it's only been myself pushing myself to run. And so I keep failing at that. I keep stopping after a week or two and not being any fitter than when I started. And so, one, this keeps me accountable, and two, I know what my fitness level is, and I'm probably going to be easy on myself because I don't really like running that much compared to gym-based training. And so if I have someone who knows my fitness level and knows what my other training is, they can then push me harder than I can push myself. And I think that it'd just be better for me to train with someone else's guidance. So yeah, if you ever need a trainer during ISO, highly recommend him. And now let's move on to the main segment. Alrighty, so the main segment. I'm so excited for this week. I thought you guys wouldn't be that interested in it, but surveying on Instagram showed that you guys are, which is super awesome because I love this area of study. I think it's super cool because it hasn't really been delved into that much in the past. It's very new in terms of how we can include the menstrual cycle in training for women, because I think that there's still a lot of research to go, but if we can get how can I word this? If we can improve people's and women's performance purely by just tweaking programs based on their cycle, that's going to be really awesome and a really great advantage for the women's sporting industry in general. But anyway, back onto topic. So let's first talk about what the menstrual cycle is, and then I want to talk about how those hormones in the menstrual cycle can impact training. And then I also want to talk about what injuries can sometimes be associated with certain parts of the menstrual cycle, and then moving on to the contraceptive pill and how that can potentially impact on performance. Okay, so let's get into what the actual menstrual cycle is. So there are four main hormones of the cycle, which is FSH, LH, estrogen, and progesterone. And I can't really pronounce progesterone that well, so I'm so sorry if there's like any medical-based people out there going, what is this pronunciation? That's terrible. Forgive me, just a little FYI. And I'm going to simplify this cycle a lot because I'm here to make science easy for you guys to understand. I don't want to complicate things, so I'm going to just make it dumbed down as much as I can with still getting the knowledge to you and the science to you so that you can understand it. So for all simplistic purposes, we're going to say that the menstrual cycle that we're going to look at is 28 days. Now, a cycle can vary in days from person to person. It can go anywhere between 21 days all the way through to 35 days. And obviously for some people, they might skip a period for absolutely no reason why. I think that's called amenorrhea. Don't quote me on that. Do your own research, because that is not something I have a specialty in. But anyway, back to the cycle. So of those 28 days, there are 2 phases and 14 days in each for the 28-day cycle. Obviously, that'll differ for varying people who have different lengths of their cycle. But the first phase of the cycle is called the follicular phase, and that is where the egg or the ovum just means egg, develops into a follicle inside the ovary. And then phase 2 is called the luteal phase, and this is where the ovum has left the ovary during ovulation. And to highly simplify it all over again, these hormones, so FSH and LH, are produced in the brain, and when FSH is produced, it signals to the ovary to start stimulating 15 to 20 follicles. And then these follicles then produce estrogen. So as I mentioned, that's one of the 4 hormones to do with the menstrual cycle, or 4 main hormones, should I say. So what does estrogen do? So it gives women female characteristics like breast tissue and endometrium, and endometrium is the lining inside the uterus that sheds during our period. And then the levels of estrogen rise during this phase, and then the FSH and LH decrease. And then just before ovulation, there is a decrease in estrogen and then an increase in LH, which causes one of the follicles in the ovaries to release an egg, and this happens on day 14. So now we're halfway through the cycle, and so that's part 1 done. And part 2 now, the luteal phase, is where the follicle that released that egg releases high levels of progesterone. And what that hormone does is thickens and maintains that, uterine lining, and increases body temperature. Now make a note of that, of the increase in body temperature during that phase, because we're going to come back and talk about that in a little bit. So then if the egg isn't fertilized, so we're not pregnant, there is a drop in progesterone and estrogen, which causes FHS to increase again through negative feedback, which then causes the lining of the uterus to break down, and we have our period, and then the whole cycle starts again. And then so now what we want to think about is, okay, that's the cycle, great. How does this link to performance? So there is actually conflicting findings out there. I'm not going to say to you, yep, this is all the facts, this is what I've found in this article, because the fact is that some articles are saying it does, the cycle, certain phases of it does impact on strength and it does diminish strength, and others are saying, no, it actually doesn't have any effect on strength. So that's strength alone, but with body temperature, as I said, that increases in the luteal phase, so phase 2 of the cycle. And what papers are finding and what scientists are finding is that this might affect our aerobic capacity. So what is aerobic capacity? Aerobic capacity is your ability to take in and use oxygen. So obviously if you have a better aerobic capacity, you're fitter in terms of that, because you can take in oxygen really well, use it to the best of your abilities, which is super high up, compared to, say, me, for example, who does not have a very good aerobic capacity, as I said before. I'm not fantastic at taking in and using oxygen. Well, my body isn't. My lungs are fine, but my body isn't great at taking in and using the oxygen. And so because of the increase in body temperature, it affects our ability to transport oxygen around the body. So this is why we think that our aerobic capacity is impacted. Because if you think about it, if you're working in a really hot environment and your body temperature is 0.3 to 0.5, because that is what most women have their body temperature increased in the luteal phase, that's going to really negatively impact your ability to perform. And that's why scientists are saying that in the luteal phase, it mightn't be such a great idea to do prolonged exercise in a hot environment, because when we are hot, we're going to sweat more. And that sweating then makes it harder for the blood to pump around our body because there's less water in the blood, meaning and because the blood is a little bit thicker, it makes it a bit harder to transport oxygen around the body because the blood is moving a little bit slower. And so thereby, what this can lead to is cardiovascular strain. And so that is why we think that the aerobic system might be, and thermoregulatory system is potentially impacted on the second phase of the cycle. Now, having said this, it's all relative in terms of what your personal preference is, because the science can say this, the science is backed up and it's great and we love science, but having said this, the science for some people is saying that strength really isn't impacted. Yes, that may be true, but also let's think about anecdotal evidence, like myself. Might be too much information, but on day 1 of my period, you will not catch me doing weightlifting. You won't catch me doing 100 kilo deadlifts. Maybe during my ovulation phase of my cycle, I feel awesome and I'm like, yes, I want to go do some PBs, I want to go do some deadlifting because I feel great in that phase of my cycle. However, during the first few days of my bleeding, I really feel crap. And so I don't want to go out and perform the best of my abilities in terms of strength, but I still want to maintain physical activity. I still shouldn't let my period impact on how I live my life. So I still try to go for long walks and any physical activity I feel up to doing, and I'm not going to push myself purely because some science say that you can do whatever you want in terms of strength in any phase of the cycle. So that's one part done, and now we're going to look at some injuries that might be associated with certain phases of the cycle. So I'm sure we've all heard of ACL injuries. If we look at footy, we've always heard that, oh yeah, this guy did their ACL and they're out for 12 months. And what we're seeing a lot in women's AFL is a lot of ACL injuries too. Like I think we had one round last year, there was something like 3 ACL injuries in the one round alone. So in one weekend. And why are we seeing more ACL injuries in women in the first place? So before I explain that, I want to explain what an ACL is. So an anterior cruciate ligament, what that does is it prevents our lower leg from sliding forward. And then that crosses with the PCL, so posterior cruciate ligament, in our knee, and it keeps our leg stable. And so how the injury will happen is our knee will collapse inwards and twist while our foot stays stationary on the ground, which causes a tear or strain in the ACL. Now, women are 3 to 8 times more likely to injure their ACL than men. So as I said before, we are seeing lots more women participate in sport, which is awesome. And that is why we are seeing more ACL injuries. But there also are some physiological and genetic factors as to why women are more likely to do their ACL than men. And one of the first reasons is because of our acute angle. So now I've got the question of what is acute angle. So the acute angle is the angle between your hips and your knees. And typically in women, we do see that they have wider hips than men. And so if your knee is thereby angled more inward than, say, your male counterpart, And as I said before, how we injure our ACL is by our knee collapsing inwards and twisting. So if our knee is already facing inwards, you're more prone to an ACL injury. And so that's one part. Another part is that the menstrual cycle might actually impact our likelihood of getting an ACL injury. So studies have looked at when they are occurring, and a study I looked at in particular, they had 38 menstruating athletes who had had a ACL injury, and what they had found is a significant portion of those athletes had done their ACL on days 1 and 2 of their menstrual cycle, and which is pretty staggering stuff. However, I'm not saying that now that because now you can't go for a long run in the heat on days 1 and 2 of your period. You can do that if you want. I mean, you won't find me doing it, but if you want to do that, that's your prerogative. Go ahead and do that. And obviously there are ways to prevent ACL injuries through certain physical exercise programs, through going to your physio, wearing braces, anything like that. But it is something that is really interesting, and a lot more research does need to go into. And also, anecdotally, I had a boss earlier in this year before COVID happened, and she was a high-performance netball athlete before she went and worked for the school I was working for. And she had done her ACL 3 times in her whole career of being a netball player. And each time she was saying was on her period, which is super interesting to say, is that, yeah, we have, with the science is saying this, but, we are actually seeing it. And I think that's why it's such an amazing thing that it still needs to be more research, because clearly it's impacting our athletes. And obviously, if that's the case, we need to do something about that. Now moving on, I want to talk about the oral contraceptive pill and how that might impact our ability to perform. Now, the oral contraceptive pill has been found to decrease aerobic capacity and your efficiency of taking in and using oxygen. As I said before, that's what aerobic capacity is. And studies have found that in trained athletes, so not like me, I'm not a trained aerobic athlete. These are in athletes, so not your everyday person, who are all women, that the pill decreased their VO2 max, which is a measure of aerobic capacity and the fitness of it, and it decreased it by 4.7%, which to you and I, the average person, sorry if you're an elite runner listening to this, don't include yourself when I'm talking about this, it mightn't make that much of a difference because I'm just casually going for a run, trying to get to my 10K goal in 12 weeks. Okay, it doesn't really matter. But if we're thinking about athletes, professional athletes going to the Olympics, and one woman is on the pill and her counterpart and her opponent isn't on the pill, then maybe that person that isn't on the pill does have a slight advantage. So that's why it's significant, and that's why we really need to talk about how can we be on the pill and still use these contraceptive methods if we want to, and it not impact our physical abilities. Having said that, there are certain pills that will impact your physical performance, so not impact your aerobic capacity as much as others. And speaking for myself, I did used to be on the pill when I was a football player, and I wasn't a fan of it. It made my moods really bad, and also I did find it I got a little bit puffed, just a little bit quicker, not by much, maybe a few seconds into running, and I wasn't able to perform as high as I thought I was able to before I went on the pill. So that's some more anecdotal evidence. It's a bit interesting, and obviously more research needs to go into this. Okay, so now question of the week. So this question of the week's a bit of a deep one, but I'm not going to shy away from it because I feel like answering this might help a few people out there. So, the question of the week was, what should I do about my fear of running and exercise in public, and how can I improve on it? So first of all, I'm so sorry that you feel like this. I can't really relate, to be honest, but I will try my best to help and give you an answer for this. So first of all, from a gym perspective, even though the gyms are closed at the moment, this will relate for when they're open. Try going to a smaller gym and going at not a peak time, so like 10:30 a.m. or 2 p.m. or even 2 a.m. if you've got one of those 24-hour gyms. I'm not suggesting that you go wake up in the middle of the night and go for a run, but maybe try going to a smaller gym when there aren't many people around. So there's only just 1 or 2 people in the building or the room, wherever it may be. And then try moving to a more peak time and going for a run then, or going to a larger gym but at downtime, so not when there's many people around. And in terms for going outside running, which is pretty much the only thing you can do at the moment, I would recommend going with a friend who has a similar fitness level to you. But obviously also I want to say that do it with a mask, do it social distancing, so 1.5 meters apart. Or if you have anyone at home who lives with you, you can go with them. But yeah, if speaking from like a more a mental part of, let me start again. From another point of view is that I don't think anyone would be looking at you. I mean, I don't really care what I look like at the gym. There's plenty of videos out there of me failing at the gym. But something you might want to think about is compare what you are gaining from the run to what you are losing if you don't go for that run and if you don't maintain your physical health. Because you're always going to be better off and feeling amazing after a run. Even if you can only run for 800 meters, awesome, at least you went out and did it. I would hate to think that someone isn't exercising purely because they're scared of what they look like. I don't think anyone, like when I see people who aren't that fit going for a run, I think to myself, good on them. Like, good on them for finally trying to make a change and improve their livelihood. If someone is out there thinking, oh, that person looks like an idiot, how they run, stuff them. Like, clearly they are the person in the wrong and not you. And it takes, it takes immense strength. I completely understand. And it's not going to happen overnight that you will all of a sudden have the courage to train in public. But maybe this is bit of an expense, but if you maybe want to get a treadmill, save up and get some equipment to work out at home in, or you could even just do cardio at home that doesn't involve a treadmill or any equipment, just to improve your cardiovascular fitness, and then maybe you can go for a run and you would be able to go for a little bit longer than you were able to beforehand. So that's what I can recommend. I hope that it helps, and if you do struggle at all with any fitness related topics or things, please feel free to DM me. I have been in the place of story time, not really, but anyway, when I was in year 11, I finally signed up to athletics. Now, I'd always wanted to do athletics because all of my friends were doing it and I thought it looked really cool, but I actually shied away from it because I had heard that they do running in the warm-up and on the off season to keep up fitness, and I was so bad at running and I was really scared of it. But then I signed up because I was like, I'm sick of not being in athletics. Everyone seems to be having an amazing time. I think I'd be really good at it. I've always loved sprinting. So then I signed up for it, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. There were people there who were like not as fit as I was, so I could join in with them and train with them. And I felt good after every session, and I think that's the main point that I want to hone in on. You're never going to feel bad after exercising. It's definitely worth trying your hardest and failing rather than not trying at all. So that's what I can recommend, and I hope this has helped. And as I said, please DM me for any other help you need. Thank you everyone for listening to episode 2. I really appreciate it. If you could please subscribe to the YouTube channel, like, and even comment if you want. Let me know what you didn't like, what you did like, any improvements or things you really loved about it. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, if you could please follow at fitness_explained_by_mil on Instagram. I would greatly appreciate that too. Also, I forgot to mention in the last podcast, I'm not doing any sponsorships at the moment for this podcast. However, if you are a business out there and you are thinking about getting sponsoring a podcast, I would greatly appreciate it. Having said that, this is my passion and I do not do it for the money at all. Now onto the disclaimers. Please do not use this podcast as a diagnosis tool because it is general in nature and not tailored to your specific needs. If you are struggling with your mental or physical health and well-being, please seek out help from a medical professional such as a registered psychologist, registered and qualified dietitian, registered GP, registered exercise scientist or physiologist. Have a great day and we'll see you next time.